Once the introduction is done, Piotr comes up and he's going to present you with a, let's say, rather controversial proposal. If you know anything about Piotr and his work, that is not a surprise to you. He's been a member of the Modern Stoicism team since 2016 when we met in New York. And at first, we were just having lunch together. He'd emailed me and said, "Hey, I'm going to be at Stoicon. You're going to be at Stoicon too. I've got an interest. Let's get together and chat." And then while we were having lunch, he said, "How can I get on this team? How can I become part of this organization?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know. I have to talk to the other people who've been there." And that enterprising attitude, that initiative that he exercised, Piotr has been a really great addition to the team and helped out a number of ways over the years. He is the author of a number of books. I'm just going to highlight two of them. The most recent is a manual of Reformed Stoicism, which is part of what, there's the books, which we're going to be talking about. And another one that I'm really I think it's a really, it's great that the Reformed Stoicism idea, but this one is really interesting. Does happiness write blank pages on Stoicism and artistic creativity? Something that you don't often see paired together, a very incisive piece of analysis. He has his doctorate in philosophy from the University of Warsaw, where he lectures as well, but he does a lot of popular speaking. And you could say that, correct me if I'm wrong, Piotr, but can you say that perhaps you're one of the not only leading voices, but the face of Stoicism in Poland?
There are a few other guys, but yeah, I'm one of them, surely. Yes, that's correct.
Well, there you go. So with no further ado, it's 9:20. It's time for Piotr to start his presentation. We'll have a few minutes afterwards for questions and addressing comments and things like that. So feel free to put things into the chat in the Zoom or YouTube, and I will make sure that they get to Piotr.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you all for tuning in, for being here. Thanks for the invitation to be here. Actually, I hope you can hear me well. I hope you can see the presentation. Greg has already introduced me, so I will just simply skip that part. I don't think it will be that controversial. Some controversy may be in order, but I don't think it's kind of mind-blowing controversy what I have to say. But I hope it's inspiring, and I think that given my position as the first speaker here, I will not kind of preach Stoicism. I will not try to convince or convert or kind of win you over. Because there will be other speakers far more competent probably and less controversial than me to do just that. Instead of this, I will focus on this why part. Why do we need a Reformed Stoicism, or in general, why do we need Stoicism today in general, and how does it even work? So of course, I will outline my own approach, this controversial stuff that Greg already mentioned, but I believe that I will in some way lay groundwork for the entire event today. For the entire Stoicon, because even though Reformed Stoicism is, I'll put it this way, even though Reformed Stoicism is this kind of my own brand name, I believe that we are all, in some sense, Reformed Stoics in the broader sense, because this framework of trying to adapt, trying to apply Stoicism, trying to put it to work in the context of everyday life in the 21st century. This is something that we all, I guess, share to this or that extent. And as you will see throughout the event, throughout this long day, there are many interpretations of Stoicism. There are many approaches to Stoicism. There are many ways to talk about Stoicism, and these are not just kind of different takes or different guys talking about the same stuff. These are significantly different interpretations, sometimes contradicting each other quite seriously. I will leave it to you, dear viewers, to follow all that throughout the day. The point I want to make right now is that I don't believe that this diversity or controversy, to use that word one more time, I don't believe it is a problem. I believe quite the contrary, that this is basically what's supposed to happen. I believe that we as the Stoics in the 21st century or at least aspiring Stoics in the 21st century, we are doing this way. We are kind of fulfilling the general premise of Stoicism. Stoicism, which, by the way, yes, the two books here and this slide. Stoicism, which has never been a monolithic church. Stoicism, which has never been kind of, following, was never about just blindly following some kind of a leader that, possessed the metaphysical and ultimate truth. Stoicism has always been, since its beginning, it has always been open to debate, to, having these various sub-movements inside of the mainstream, having debates, having discussions, and so on, and so on, and so on. So what we are doing here today in this lovely online event that Phil is so ably putting together, we are just kind of continuing this great Stoic tradition of discussing, talking, and kind of oftentimes not agreeing with each other. There is a lovely story that grasps that, I believe, the story that Zeno and Chrysippus, that is the two of the founding fathers of Stoicism, were not able to agree between themselves upon the definition of the act of walking, which is pretty basic, pretty basically grasps the idea that we don't have to be agreeing on everything all the time. So that's that would be the point here. And another deep-seated, another kind of very foundational tenet, very deep premise of what we are doing here. And by we, I mean, again, myself for sure, other guys in the modern Stoicism movement, but modern Stoic, contemporary Stoics in general, to this or that extent, I believe that we all share this kind of idea that we are not supposed to simply limit ourselves to read Marcus Aurelius and just enjoy the book and kind of, say that he was a great philosopher. We need much more than that. Stoicism, if we want to have it as a living thing, we don't need it to be some kind of a historical study only. We need it to be a study of application. We want to apply Stoicism to our life today in the 21st century as we have the life. We want Stoicism, or at least I want Stoicism to be valid, to be germane, to be relevant to our actual life in the year 2020, or actual 2022. Now, again, by doing this, I believe that we are fulfilling the Stoic premise and also the Stoic promise, because Stoicism is applied by definition. There is no Stoicism that isn't applied. Stoicism is a philosophy of life, and the philosophy of life makes sense only as a lived philosophy, only as a philosophy that we live by, or that we try, at least aspire to live by. Another story, Epictetus made fun of those guys who, during his conversation and teachings and discussions, guys who were kind of, bogged down with pure abstractions and some kind of irrelevant considerations. He made fun of them because if there is no practical application, if you cannot put an idea to a practical use, from the Stoic point of view, doesn't really make sense. And now a bit of tautology. If we want to apply Stoicism to life, we need to apply it to the life that we are currently having and currently living, because we don't have any other life. This is the tautology. We only have the one life, the life we are actually having. So what follows from here is that if we want to understand Stoicism that way, and if we want to apply Stoicism that way, we cannot reject, we cannot postpone, we cannot not take into account all the realities of the world and of life as we know it. Technological realities of the 21st century, political realities, social, scientific, and so on and so on and so on. All those considerations must be, in this or that way, a part of our Stoic approach. Stoicism, what I'm trying to say here is that Stoicism that would be kind of detached from the actual life and from the actual realities of life wouldn't be Stoicism at all. As I will argue later on, it would be contrary to nature. So if we want to live by the Stoic principles, we must somehow, in this or that way, adapt Stoicism, adapt it to our life here and now in the 21st century. Which brings us to the kind of a set of core questions. Questions like, what does Stoicism look like in the digital era? I mean, not asking this question would be kind of ridiculous, right? Since we are literally talking about Stoicism over the internet. And in the same vein, what does Stoicism look like in the time of nuclear deterrence? What does Stoicism look like in the context of what we know about cosmology, origins of the universe, in the context of what we know about our own biology and the human evolutionary past, and so on, and so on, and so on. Which brings us to the quote by Lawrence Becker, who one of the key influential figures in the Stoic field, who I had the privilege to personally meet, and who was kind of a very inspiring person. He died, I guess, 2019, so that's 3 years ago. He authored a very important book, called A New Stoicism, back in 1998. And this is one of the key passages here. I do not deny that my views on Stoicism and my line of work in general is hugely inspired by what Larry Becker did. And this is one of the key passages here, right? That the main challenge of Stoicism is to try to imagine what Stoicism would look like or should look like today if it had the opportunity to react and kind of adapt to all those developments that occurred over the course of the last 2 millennia, kind of reacting to Newton, Hume, Kant, Descartes, Marx, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So, and this is the key approach here. What would Stoicism look like today? How do we take into the Stoic account everything that happened over these 2000 years? And obviously, so this is this overarching idea, I believe, and obviously as you already know, my own answer here, and I don't require everyone to agree with that, but my own way to deal with this question is Reformed Stoicism. Obviously, the idea of Reformation is not my own. The idea of Reformation doesn't come out of thin air. At least in Christianity, as you can see, and at least in Judaism, we have those Reformation movements. So my idea was why not try something like that in Stoicism? One tricky, subtle and tricky but interesting difference here is that Martin Luther, who you can see here, he didn't want to, as far as I can understand, he didn't want to reform Christianity. He didn't want to produce something new. He wanted to, so to speak, make Christianity great again. He wanted to restore the original meaning, the original sense. He wanted to go back to the original true meaning of the Word of God, and so on, and so on, and so on. In my own work, I do not want to go back anywhere. I don't do the move of, trying to restore, trying to go back. I want to go forward. I want to update. I want to, more specifically, I want to tell the Stoic message, tell the Stoic story using today's language, today's conceptual framework, and as I mentioned already, taking into account everything that we know today about things. So one of the key examples here is the question of nature and science. I call it a key example because science, of course, is something we cannot skip, because due to its great importance and the influence on our life today. But also the thing is that science, in the modern sense of the term, science as we have it today, is something that didn't exist in antiquity. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, they of course they had philosophy, they had knowledge and so on, teaching and so on and so on, but they didn't have modern science in the sense that we know it today. So one of the key questions here is how and what should Stoics do about science? How should we react? What should be the relationship between Stoicism and science? My answer, which I'm pretty much convinced is correct, is that Stoicism should accept science with open arms, should enjoy, entertain, and above all, employ all that science has to tell us about reality. The question is why, and the answer is to answer that we need to get back to the puzzling idea of following nature. I call it a puzzling idea you're probably familiar with. Following nature, consistency with nature. This is the ancient Stoic teaching that everything that is consistent with nature is good, and we need to live our life by following nature, and so on and so on. I call it a puzzling idea because in the meta sense, because for the ancient Stoics, as far as we can tell, it was quite self-evident idea. It was the meaning of the phrase, what does it mean to follow nature, and so on. It was quite clear. Today, I believe it's nothing but clear. Given the complexity of and the amount of knowledge we have accumulated, The idea of following nature today is kind of ambiguous and kind of puzzling. And the question, how do we translate that idea in the ancient Stoic idea of following nature into today's conceptual framework is very difficult. And I believe that one of the most inspiring and most kind of cogent and prudent ways to go here is to understand the concept of following nature less as a normative idea, but more like factfulness, more like a demand to be precise about facts. That when it comes to facts, we need to, if we want to be following nature, we need to be precise, diligent, accurate about facts, which kind of, not surprisingly, corresponds to the basics of the scientific method. So in other words, a Stoic cannot deny facts. A Stoic cannot base his or her actions on counterfactual statements. The next question is, where does this knowledge about facts come from? The answer, from science, mostly because we live in the 21st century and science is the source of knowledge about facts. So that would be the argument here concerning science and nature, pretty explaining about some pretty informative concerning Reformed Stoicism. Now, that's not all, absolutely, because when we talk about nature, the thing is that fun fact in the philosophical sense of fun is that many points of Stoicism, many ancient principles of Stoicism turned out to be actually backed by science, and it is always a nice point when we can see that certain principles that the ancient Stoics arrived at through pure thinking and speculation, it turns out that they are indeed backed by full-fledged modern data-driven science. Obviously, it's not everything that is that it's affirmed and accepted. Most notably, one of the examples where the Stoics were wrong it concerns the very structure of matter, because you can see the quote by Feynman here. It is the Epicureans, actually the rivals of Stoicism, that were right about the atomic nature of the world, and the Stoics were wrong about that. But on the other hand, for example, this mystic idea, semi-mystic idea from the ancient Stoics that all things are somehow, or living things are somehow interconnected in some manner. This kind of reflects well on the idea of DNA, right? This kind of tree of life and the DNA, which in a way connects all the living organisms. This sounds very modern, if we say it this way. Or more importantly, the psychological stuff about how human mind works. My favorite example, premeditatio malorum, what the ancient Stoics taught us about, envisioning and kind of considering the bad scenarios before they happen, so we can prepare. Psychology today teaches us about the power of negative visualization, which is kind of basically the same thing. So it kind of backs up what the ancient Stoic had to say. The similar goes for the ideas how narratives and framing our mental framework, how all that shapes the way we feel and we perceive the world, and how we react to the things that happen, or about forming habits. Here, the teachings of the ancient Stoics turned out to be very, very data-based and confirmed by modern science. But that's not all, of course. On a completely different hand, the important part of what I mean by Reformed Stoicism is that, to use some broad strokes, we can say that antiquity in general and the ancient Stoics, they believed that Stoicism was the best solution for everyone ever. That the perfect scenario is, everyone converting to Stoicism, living a Stoic life, and obviously those ideas about cosmopolis in which every citizen is a wise person. This is where it comes from, and cool. That I'm glad they had this idea, because probably without this strong normative thinking, we wouldn't have Stoicism today as we know it. The question is, should we still be following suit with this kind of one size fits all type of thinking today? I mean, taking into account everything that we know about human beings, about diversity of humans, about diversity of human experiences and various walks of life, do we still want to kind of keep up that idea? I think that we need to kind of take a step back, kind of downsize a bit in a constructive way, and just sticking to this heavy duty idea that Stoicism is always the best answer for virtually everybody may be kind of misleading here. And I do not mean it's not just a rhetorical trick. It's not a defeat. I believe it's a kind of proactive and positive, taking into account that the idea that different people live different lives, and some of them simply maybe not happy with with what the Stoics have to propose. And accepting this fact, accepting this idea is a very important tenet of my own approach. And I do have, concerning my books and what Greg said in the beginning, I do have one good example. I believe that concerning the book about artistic creativity, I believe that a creative artist is a good example here. Creative artist who is kind of trying to, follow these vague ideas of inspiration, expression, not rational stuff, maybe living a bit of a crazy life. Those ideas we don't usually, think that they go well with Stoicism. A creative artist may be a good example of someone who doesn't really benefit from living the Stoic life. Maybe in some ways he does, but in another he doesn't. So he consciously chooses a different way. At least I, as a Reformed Stoic, I want to accept that, and I want to accept that he or she can pursue value in a different manner. Yes, so that would be this one. And one basically final thought here is that concerning rhetoric again, because Stoicism, as you probably know by now, is often associated with this idea of toughness. Being, a Stoic is stereotyped usually as this kind of a restrained, cold-blooded, self-disciplined person who kind of is, adamant in the face of adversity and, is not concerned with failure and so on and so on and so on. And this is obviously true. Now, we may ask the crazy question: do we still need that? The answer to that is, unfortunately, yes, we do, because the pains of human life are kind of timeless. We've seen the pandemic. We are having the war in Ukraine. We are having, all these big and little tragedies of human life. So there will always be a demand for this kind of being toughness and being adamant in the face of bad things happening. But this is the message that has been around for 1,000 years, and this has been covered quite extensively. So what I propose here is that we, as Stoics in the 21st century, we have in a way more to gain by kind of focusing not only on those traumatic things and big events like losing a child, losing a limb, war breaking out, that kind of stuff. Not only those high stakes situations, but kind of low-key problems, doldrums of daily life, intellectual challenges of the modern world, and so on and so on and so on. In particular, this is a kind of a dual thing, I believe. All this toughness, being adamant in the face of adversity, and so on and so on and so on, works very well as long as I kind of focus it on myself, right? When I get to talk to others about Stoicism, about the principle of living a good life, and so on and so on and so on, I believe we need, or at least I need, much softer rhetoric, because it's a very delicate situation. It is very easy to become to get oneself look ludicrous, or to become a hypocrite, even if, say, a refugee from Ukraine comes here and I engage in a conversation about I, as a person from a affluent country where there is no war and everything is comfortable, and we have a person who suffered a great deal of hard stuff, and if I try to teach them what do you need to do to live a good life and so on, this is a very delicate situation. It is very easy to make yourself look stupid in a way. So concerning conversation with others, this kind of a delicate, softer rhetoric is, I believe, required. And for myself, yes, all the toughness, self-discipline, and so on is okay. And of course, leading by example, right? I can suggest things, I can and I should lead by example if I'm capable of doing that. But I should be very, very careful about, imposing hard stuff on other people and kind of demanding that they do this or that in a particular manner. So I said that's the last part. I also have I usually talk about the avoiding of conservative and ascetic misinterpretations, but this is I've covered that already during previous Stoicons, so I can answer questions about that, but I won't dive into that at this very moment. For summation, one final thought I'd like to share with you. I believe that I laid, some idea. I spelled out some ideas about what Reformed Stoicism is or should be. So just to recap, I believe that what we need today to, live a conscious, smart life as Stoics in the 21st century, I believe that we need something more than just, juggling quotes from Marcus Aurelius or Seneca. Wearing a white robe or whatever. I have a green one, but as an example, just reading books, having quotes handy for every occasion is in a way too little. We need to just trying to be this proverbial cold-blooded Stoic who is restrained, disciplined, and so on and so on. It's cool and it's necessary, but my point is that we need something more. We need to go beyond that. We need to be equipped with those Stoic ideas, Stoic principles, Stoic tools, and everything. And we need to be, brave and open to go out there in the world and kind of take on and tackle the intellectual and everyday challenges of the present life. Period. I guess that's the thing here.
Well, we do have some good questions lined up in the chat.
Could you read them
both
loud?
in Zoom and in YouTube? So I'm going to read one that, yeah, I'm going to. One was, I have to because it was a direct message, so you can't even see it. And this one's a little bit, it might require a little bit of explanation. So could you ask Piotr to comment on the inspirations for his work that he drew from Lawrence Becker's A New Stoicism? You addressed that partly, but here's the real question. I'm interested in a critical perspective on Becker's work. Where did you, Piotr, build on it, and where did you deviate from Becker's thoughts? And we should remark that Becker's A New Stoicism, really, really important work in what we could call the modern Stoic revival. Also a difficult work, right?
Yes, it's a difficult work.
So Piotr,
it's a difficult question.
What do you think about that?
I think that's a very, very precise and very difficult question. I think I will skirt it a little bit because it's a very complicated matter. But I will try to answer. Where I draw from Becker is basically first, foremost, and in the most deep sense, is the idea of trying to update Stoicism, trying to all the time not just passively adapt ideas from the past, but trying to update them, taking into account everything that we know today, taking into account everything that happened philosophically, intellectually, politically, and so on and so on and so on. So this is the main idea. Also, the concept that the problem of nature, right? Becker says that it's also inspired by Becker that that according to nature should basically mean according to facts, and according to facts implies a relationship with science. So this is the spirit that I'm working in. Also, this is something that's basically mentioned in Becker. Mentioned in passing only, but the idea that we may need to accept that Stoicism doesn't work for everyone and everybody. That on the one hand, Stoicism, there is a much wider diversity of possible Stoic lives, that we Stoics are not only just, diplomats, lawyers, and so on, but there is a wide diversity of very Stoic lives. This is Becker, but also maybe on the other hand, certain walks of life are just simply not, do not dovetail well with Stoicism. This is also Becker. Where I deviate, I won't say that I deviate. It's rather that I do not follow Becker in everything, right? This is his work is is much more detailed and much more kind of closer to the ancient text that I kind of suggested here. So I drew the general inspiration and the general direction, but I'm not competent enough, I guess, to consider all the details of his work.
Okay, here's another one coming from the YouTube chat. from Neil. I like this idea of, in quotes, a meta-Stoicism, controlling your own interpretation and impression of Stoicism is itself very Stoic. So I'm going to add one other thing to that. Obviously, it can't just be like, as you said, like it's what we call a smorgasbord here, you know, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, some life hacks.
Totally not my intention. Totally not my intention. I'm not suggesting that you can, that anything goes. I'm not suggesting that you can be anywhere you want. What I'm trying to suggest is that we need to go beyond certain stereotypes and go kind of beyond certain associations to Stoicism. But of course, there are certain limits that we shouldn't, there are certain boundaries that we shouldn't break if we want to remain Stoics, obviously.
Yeah. So do you think that this idea of like, you take the Stoic literature, ideas, practices, experiences that one has, and then like Neil said, controlling your own interpretation of Stoicism would be itself Stoic? Does that make sense? I think
I'm not the one to say. In a way, it is up to you guys to call me Stoic or not. But there is a kind of a deeply Stoic idea in this kind of controlling your own interpretation, because there is no there is no monolith in Stoicism. There is no kind of curriculum that you need to just blindly follow and that makes you Stoic. It all comes from practice, and practice will be different from one person to another. So there needs to be some leeway for interpretation, but of course, and again, it needs to remain in certain it mustn't defy a reason. I would say this.
Here's because we probably just have time for one last one, and so this is in the Zoom chat from Liz. Can you be a real Stoic if you don't believe in an ordered and benevolent universe? I think this is one of the things that
and this is the probably most important question of all, because the orthodox answer, of course, is that if you do not believe in that benevolent and ordered universe, you are not a Stoic. But on some deeper level, I believe that the very, at least to me personally, the very, very inspiring and kind of very deeply going issue is that how can we be Stoics if the world is kind of falling apart, and if we are not seeing this benevolence, this structure, and so on and so on. For example, the war, inflation, pandemic, and so on and so on. This is ultimately the Stoic experience that I would like to believe in this benevolent universe, but the facts are telling me quite the opposite. How do I stick to my Stoic, and how do I hold on to my Stoic principles in the face of this observation? This is the ultimately and intimately Stoic experience, and this is a good point to make here, I guess.
Well, this is an excellent place to remain on schedule and close out for a short 10-minute break. We'll be coming back with the first panel, Stoicism Around the World, moderated by Greg Lopez. But thanks very much, Piotr, for a interesting and challenging discussion.
Thank you.